Prior to the 50s, surfing and surfers in general were seen as kind of a cult practice. But within a few years, the surfing lifestyle had become a culture in and of itself. We had our own language, fashion, music, rules, and etiquette. We had our own folk heroes and shrines. And by the late 50s, we had our own Mecca, Hawaii's North Shore. And now, and every year since then, pilgrims come by the thousands to challenge the world's biggest waves. Many of our guests tonight were among the earliest travelers to the North Shore and Makaha Beach. Some of them have even been honored with breaks being named after them, but we won't name names. In the early 50s, Walter and his brother Flippy Hoffman were among the first on the big wave scene. Walter's father was printing Hawaiian designs on fabric for the Aloha shirt makers, George Branniger and Nat Norfleet Sr. of Kahala Sportswear. Branniger and Norfleet would send photos of surfing in Hawaii, and that was all it took to get Walter and Flippy on a fast ship. Before long, Walter and others like Buzzy Trent, Ted Crane, Chuck McClellan, Junior Knox, and Jim Fisher had established the first Howley beachhead at Makaha. These early travelers to the islands brought back to the mainland certain symbols of the warm aloha spirit of Hawaii. They wore the colorful floral-printed aloha shirts, the thong slaps, and the classic Hawaiian baggy trunks. These were the first trendsetters of surfer fashion. The 50s were an intense period of sharing between Hawaiian and California surf cultures. Also, too, during the early 50s, as Joe Quigg recalls, surfing was attracting more and more young surfers. And as many of us who started back then share similar recollections, like how heavy the damn boards were and how short our arms were, for us, the pleasure of surfing was probably due more to the fact that you didn't have to lug that plank any further than actually paddling it out. However, the true test came when it was time to carry the damn thing back home again. The South Bay area of Los Angeles was one of the main centers of the new board evolution. Dale Velzy and Hap Jacobs were about to accommodate every young surfer's dream. The Velzy-Jacobs boards were shorter, lighter weight, and most important, affordable. They brought surfing within the reach of thousands of Grammys up and down the coast. Joe Quigg gives Velzy the credit for popularizing surfing.
What Velzy did all along the Strand from Manhattan, Hermosa, and Redondo was to get all the kids who wanted to surf onto his small boards. Yeah, if you ask me, it was Velzy and his Grammys who started the whole mass surfing phenomena thing in California.
A little further south, another young kahuna shaper was in great demand and would one day go on to become one of surfing's greatest entrepreneurs, Hobie Alter. While he was still in high school, he would shape about 20 boards a summer at his parents' house in Laguna Beach. After a few years, it was apparent that he had a successful enterprise. So in 1958, Hobie opened a major board-building shop and showroom in Dana Point. As his business really began to take off, Hobie did as Simmons had done years before. He turned to the master shaper, Joe Quigg, for help.
Hobie came to Hawaii, where I was once again living. Told me he had orders for about 500 of the new foam boards and said he needed my help. I couldn't believe the business he had. Sometimes I was shaping 10 boards a day.
By this time, we thought surfing was as popular as it could get. In fact, the waves were getting crowded. But no one was prepared for what was about to happen. When Hollywood got a hold of surfing, things went sort of crazy. We thought names like Dora, Greg Knoll, or some other heavyweights like them would impact surfing in a big way. God, were we wrong. The name that would impact surfing like an asteroid slamming in was Kathy Kroner. Say who? Yep. But most of us knew of her by the name Gidget. Before we knew it, Gidget was going everywhere, and a steady stream of beach movies was unleashed on the American public. The movie Beach Party marked the first time Dick Dale and the Deltones played before a national audience. Another movie, Muscle Beach Party, announced the introduction of Little Stevie Wonder. This time marked the beginnings of a tribal revival. Serious surfers weren't at these lame movies. Not a chance. And when they weren't surfing or something, you could find them at places like Pier Avenue Auditorium or at the Santa Monica Civic, being completely blown away by movies like The Big Surf by Bud Brown, or Slippery When Wet by Bruce Brown, Surf Fever by John Severson, or Let There Be Surf by Jim Freeman. These movies were the hottest thing in surfing during those years. Every night we could see our heroes screaming across a massive Makaha face, or being slammed by the pipe's vicious lip, or a Waimea bone-crushing 30-foot monster. We just couldn't get enough of this stuff. Surfers had exploded on the mass social consciousness. All of a sudden, surf posers were everywhere, as the movies, the music, and the media all hopped on the surfing bandwagon. Make that a Woody wagon. To hype the surfing lifestyle. The whole country seemed to know what surfers were about.
All the razzle-dazzle above marked a strange time in surfing history. But during that same carefree period, as the greasy 50s slid into the sunny 60s, true surfers remained hundreds of miles away from the glitter and dreck of Hollywood. Throughout, and despite all the big screen embarrassment, California's Surfing Society continued to develop a character of its own. It evolved into an aloof cult that produced its own movies and music, discovered and anointed its own heroes, communicated intelligence about surfing life in its own idiomatic way, and established a sense of surfer style and ritual that endures to this day.
When it came to communicated intelligence, there were the first books like Tom Blake's Hawaiian Surf Riders in 1935 and Doc Ball's California Surf Riders in 1946. But to the young California surfer, there was only one thing he looked forward to: the Surfer magazine by California photographer and surfer John Severson. Surfer magazine, as everyone knows today, went on to become a great success and ultimately ushered in a whole new era of surf art. Everyone's favorite hero, Murph the Surf, was a regular in the surfer pages, and his creator, Rick Griffin, went on to become one of the most recognized artists of the surf rock psychedelic 60s and 70s. This new magazine gave us glimpses of hitherto unseen surf sights around the world. Also, for the first time, we were able to see the now famous photos of Leroy Grannis and Ron Church, Bud Brown, Tom Keck, and Dr. Don James, the ones they brought us every couple of months. By 1962, we were going around the globe with Surfer magazine. Places like New Zealand, Australia, New Guinea, Mexico, as well as the East Coast, were seen by most of us for the first time in Surfer magazine. There was no doubt that surfing was truly an international sport, and we knew that surfing was here to stay, despite all of the hodad, greaser rhetoric that was ever present in the editorials of local beach papers and in the inane, beachy movies. It was always surfer versus hodad. Concerning this period of surfing history, I think John Severson's reply to an editorial article in 1961 neatly summed up our feelings on the issue. The guy writes, in reply to a recent article, referring to a do-away with hodad's article.
One of the reasons some hodads can't surf well is that their boards are slippery. Hair oil and other greases on a highly polished, decorative-type surfboard make for very difficult surfing. To be a good surfer takes more than a desire to belong to a group. It takes a lot of actual practice. Surfing.
Surf music, beach blanket movies, and related popular culture spin-offs all had varying degrees of influence on the non-surfing public at large. But ironically, in a strange twist of cinematic fate, the most powerful pro-surfing medium of the surfing 60s was a 91-minute-long, privately produced surf movie that quietly challenged and beat Hollywood at its commercial and glamorous game. We're recalling, of course, The Endless Summer, a charming homemade surf flick that reached out to the social world beyond surfing, that generated a positive image and publicity windfall for the sport that is still remembered and felt 30-some years later. That documentary, produced by then 28-year-old Dana Point filmmaker Bruce Brown, was arguably the most important and influential